Think. Okay, so it's the end, roughly, of 2017. It's been an alright year for veganism. There's been a lot of vegan films out this year, and so I thought I might as well do a top 5 vegan films list of 2017. I did want to do a top 10, but I couldn't find enough films that were purely vegan based. A lot of them had like airs of veganism in and around them. So yeah, I'm doing purely vegan based films here. But anyway, into the top 5. And number 5 comes Meet the End by Unilad. Now, I've noticed recently that Lad Bible and Unilad have started doing more vegan-based posts, which I'm all about. I love that. It's unusual to me for them to come out with a short documentary about veganism, and I quite like it because it's coming from such an unlikely source. More people who wouldn't otherwise watch vegan films will have watched this and will have reached them. It's quite upfront about the damage that animal agriculture is doing to our environment. It touches on ocean dead zones, touches on how animal agriculture is the leading cause of climate change and of species extinction. It's a bit weird because I recognise some of the people in it because some of it is shot in Manchester. So that was a bit weird, but I think Lad Bible are based here. There's some elements that it touches on in a way that I prefer to how other films in this list have approached these subjects. Say for example, there's a bit that Katie Louise Powell at the end mentions about speciesism, but she doesn't say the word speciesism because a lot of people I find get quite turned off by that because they don't see themselves as prejudiced people. But she mentions that we look at animals in how they can serve us and not as their own beings with their own perception of the world, which I really liked. I thought it was really well done. And it also mentions something else, and that's that not everybody in the world could possibly have a Western diet in the way that a lot of English people do, and that really flung it into perspective for me. I understood that the standard Western diet was wildly unsustainable and was one that not everybody in the world could have, but to put it into the terms that they did, it really made me think about it in a way that I hadn't before, and I think I'm going to take that forwards in my activism and explain to people that it's also about equity. It also addresses government control over how the public perceives animal agriculture, and I liked that it mentioned it, but I think it did focus for a little bit too long on the government and the government's responsibility regarding veganism. I feel like it is genuinely a bottom-up kind of system that we have to work with. It's very consumer-based. We need to control the government as a social pressure, but it does also explain the lobby powers that animal agriculture has, and so it saved itself there a bit. But overall, a very good vegan film. I was glad to see that come out of Unilad. Okay, so number 4 on this list is Simon Amstell's Carnage. Now this was a BBC 3 mockumentary directed and produced by Simon Amstell. I believe it was produced by Simon Amstell, and it's based 50 years in the future from now, so 2067. That maths took me too long. But yeah, it's set in 2067 and it's looking back at the present day and our past on how we use animals. So it's set in a future where everybody's vegan, and we see the way that we used animals in the present day as abhorrent in the way that it truly is. But it's good to show an outside perspective because we find ourselves so immersed in our day-to-day lives that it's quite good to have, even if it's an imaginary perspective, from people in the future looking at us now. It helps us take a step back from ourselves. I like that it makes fun of both vegans and non-vegans. A lot of the time vegans find it hard to make fun of themselves because what we're fighting for is so serious. But I like that it had that element to it. It also teaches a little bit about the history of veganism, which, to be honest, isn't something that I knew before now. Maybe I'm a bit too ignorant, but yeah, I don't think it's something that the average BBC Three viewer would know about. But with it having this outsider perspective, it shows the hypocrisy of parents today, well, maybe 10 years back, taking their parents to see Babe, now, like when kids watch Peppa Pig, for example, and then feeding their children like a bacon sandwich. I never made the link, maybe I was just a bit stupid when I was younger, but yeah, I never realised how bizarre it was to watch films like Chicken Run and want the chickens to survive, but also then go to KFC. It's a bit cheeky. When I've done outreach, I've encountered a couple of farmers, and they seem to feel like they're the victims here, and it makes fun of that perspective. Which, I mean, they're brave for doing that. Farmers are a fierce bunch, but and again, with this outsider perspective, it really does show how easy it is to be vegan, especially with the line, "Just eat a cracker." I might get that tattooed because that's excellent. It makes so much sense. It's like, people always ask me, "Oh, well, what do you eat?" Or like, everything, but like, there's so many things you could eat, just eat a cracker. It also points out that veganism isn't an extreme action, especially when the alternative is killing and sucking udders. And overall, it's just a future that I would very much like to see. Well done, Simon. Now, our third film is from a fellow YouTuber, and it's by Plant-Based News, and it's Vegan 2017. Now, what I really liked about this film is that it shows the progress that veganism is making, and it's been the same with the previous years that they've done. It really shows that our movement isn't futile. It shows the havoc that we're wreaking on the industry, especially the dairy industry, with the Dairy Pride Act, which they speak about right from the get-go. And with the Dairy Pride Act, it shows that we're getting government attention. I think most people who saw the Dairy Pride Act acknowledged that it was stupid, especially when we have like peanut butter. Nobody's trying to take away the butter out of peanut butter. So yeah, with that, it shows all of the media coverage that we're getting, and veganism has really hit the media pretty hard this year. It starts out very health heavy, which isn't something that I like to focus on too much, because I feel like it's not a good way to stay vegan, but 2017 has been a very good year for showing that a whole foods, plant-based vegan diet really is amazing for your health. Thankfully, it moved on very quickly onto the environmental side, which is crazy how many people don't know about that. It's said in the documentary that 1 in 20 people are aware of the damage that animal agriculture does to the environment, and that's crazy. That number needs to improve. And I like that they touched on the environment, because it counters people who will always say, yeah, well, what about grass-fed beef? They mean cows. But it shows that that's just as bad for the environment as the traditional factory farming method is. But also, I like that it's realistic. It shows the setbacks that we've had as a movement, including the recent exclusion of a clause for animal sentience in a recent Brexit bill. But, you know, that kind of news is a good motivator to kind of get us moving as a movement. And it's a very thorough film as well. It touches on clothing, and I feel like that is often a battle that we forget about as vegans. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed the film. I'm looking forward to Vegan 2018. Now, our second film is from another YouTuber, and it's a pretty heavy film, but you'll probably guess what it is. By Earthling Ed and Surge Activism, it's Land of Hope and Glory. Now, I really admire Ed's activism. He's such a good voice for veganism, and I feel like this film has helped reach many people that he wouldn't have otherwise touched. Right from the get-go, the film mentions the indoctrination that we have all around us, in England at least, about happy eggs and laughing cows, and how ridiculous that is, where these animals have had to die for these products, but you don't notice that, you don't think about that, because of the very advertisement-heavy world that we're living in right now. And I know Ed was aiming for a UK Earthlings in an aim to tackle the notion that we hear far too often as vegans of, oh well, that doesn't happen in our country, because this film says on the top right corner throughout the film when these incidents happened and where they happened, and it's really good to have recent localized footage of these awful things happening, because it shows that it's right beside us. Everybody who watches that who is from England is going to see a case of this happening close to them. I know Ed was aiming for a UK Earthlings, but I feel like in a lot of ways he quite exceeded Earthlings. Now, Earthlings is a fantastic film and it's changed a lot of people to veganism. However, it's quite a vast subject to touch on in just one documentary. Whilst Ed managed to localise it just to the UK, it makes it far more accessible to the average UK viewer, and it doesn't focus too much on the concept of speciesism, which again I think is very important, but it's something that makes it a lot less accessible. It's beyond a lot of people's reach when they're first introduced to veganism, whilst a lot of people can see that this is happening and that it is wrong, and they will make the emotional connection immediately, and they won't have any of these you are a speciesist person blockades put up, if that makes any sense. The film's also had a wider impact. Whenever I do an Earthlings experience, we always use this footage, and it's so powerful because people will often say, yeah, well, my food's humanely slaughtered, and that's just obviously not true. You can't possibly say humane slaughter when you're confronted with recent localized footage, and it really helps show why vegans get so angry. And also, I have so much respect for the people who managed to capture this footage. What brave people. And towards the end, it mentioned sheep and the horrors that they go through, and I feel like they're a forgotten victim of the animal agriculture industries, so I really liked that they had an entire segment focused to them. Overall, it was quite well structured. I like that it had different chapters. And finally, you've probably guessed what the number one slot is, but before that, I'd like to give a shout out to Okja. Okja didn't make the list because Okja wasn't quite a vegan film, you could say, but it does help illustrate that each animal that people eat was a sentient being, especially towards the end. Also liked, similarly to Carnage, how they were able to make fun of vegans with their ALF people. Yeah, overall a really enjoyable film. You barely missed out on the slot. But yes, back on track, our number one film obviously is What the Health. By the creators of Cowspiracy comes a new documentary about the health impact of eating animals compared to a plant-based diet. I did feel like at times Kit was speaking to the wrong people when, say, like, he called up the American Cancer Society and like he was just talking to somebody who runs the phones. They don't run the policies or anything. He should have asked to speak to somebody higher up. But I mean, you know, I get it. You gotta make an impactful documentary. And you know, Jane Chapman and Amy probably weren't standard cases, but you know, I think the average viewer has a skeptical enough mind to decipher that for themselves. This documentary was so important. It's had such a massive impact with a lot of celebrities going vegan thanks to this film. That's why it has this number one slot, because it touches on so many things that a lot of the average people don't know, and because it had such a wide reach, it's had such a good impact on the movement. It had a very similar story to Cowspiracy, but I mean, you know, if it's not broke, don't fix it. There were some issues I had with Cowspiracy in terms of how it looked, how it was produced. So like, I felt like a lot of the time the image was quite blown out, but they completely fixed that with What the Health. They really stepped up the game. They noticed what was wrong with Cowspiracy and they completely fixed it. It dispels a lot of the genetic myths that we believe around diseases, as it shows that most diseases, well, most diabetes, heart diseases and cancers are down to diet. I really like that it touches on eggs and chicken flesh as being unhealthy, because a lot of people see those two things as health foods, but in fact they are filled with saturated fat and cholesterol. I like that it goes so hard on milk as well, because it pressures vegetarians. A lot of people think that a vegetarian diet is healthy, but because it goes so hard on milk and on eggs, it shows that being vegetarian isn't really enough if you're just looking at your health. I know I said earlier that I don't really like focusing on health too much, and I still stand by that, but the important reach that this film has had on the general public is why it has this #1 slot. It also explains why a lot of doctors who their patients obviously trust don't recommend a plant-based whole food vegan diet. It also gives like a dummy's explanation of lobbying in case like you're completely ignorant to this, which I feel like a lot of people probably are, in case you're completely ignorant to how money helps influence policies. It helps explain that, and that animal agriculture and companies who sell animal products are incredibly wealthy and so have a grasp on what we are recommended to eat. I really like that it makes the historical comparison to smoking, because everything we're seeing now with animal products and health has happened before with cigarettes, and everybody knows now that smoking is bad for you. And finally, because it's a health-based film, a lot of people say, yes, well, I only eat organic, and that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. Sure, it's good that you're not using pesticides and antibiotics. However, organic animal products are still carcinogenic, are still high in cholesterol and saturated fat, are still wildly unhealthy for you. And so I really liked that it touched on that as a health documentary. Overall, What the Health was, I don't know, take it with a grain of salt, maybe, because it does exaggerate some claims. But overall, it was a really good film for the movement, despite some of the criticism that some people have had about it. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you think I missed out any films, let me know in the comment section below. If you agreed with my rating, give me a thumbs up. If you disagreed with my order, give me a thumbs down. But yeah, this has been a Coli video. I'll talk to you next time.